Welcome back. How long have you been watching my channel? Let me know below.
While they sipped champagne with my brother on a yacht off Miami, I was stuffing my life into 2 garbage bags, barefoot, shaking, and done pretending we were ever really a family. You know how they say families are messy, but love holds it all together? Well, I think some people just call it love so they don't have to admit how much it hurts. I spent the better part of my life believing the mess meant we were close. I believed it so hard, I didn't even realize I was the only one cleaning it up. From the outside, we looked like your average suburban family. 2 parents with a comfortable home, 2 kids who turned out okay, family barbecues, Christmas cards, matching pajamas. But when you're the one always behind the camera, you notice who's never in the picture. I guess it started long before that weekend, but the moment everything snapped into focus was last Tuesday. I'd just had minor surgery, nothing life-threatening, but enough to leave me sore, groggy, and emotionally raw. I didn't tell many people because I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but I did text my mom, Sharon, to let her know I'd be out of commission for a few days. Her response? A thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No, are you okay? No call. Not even a, let me know if you need help. And I only knew they were in Miami when I saw a picture of them on Rick's Instagram story. Mom, Dad, and Rick, all smiles, clinking glasses on a yacht with some influencer-looking crowd. I played it on loop, not even because I was surprised, but because it hit me that not a single one of them had checked in. Not once. I laid there in my apartment, ice pack sliding off my hip, still in the same sweatshirt I'd slept in, staring at the screen, just feeling like a damn fool. I'd always known Rick was the favorite. He was the charming one, the successful one, the one who always got away with everything. Growing up, I'd try to speak up when he broke things or lied, but I was always told to be the bigger person. And eventually, I got so good at being the bigger person that no one noticed I was getting smaller and smaller. Over time, I became the family therapist, the errand runner, the one who could be counted on, but only when someone needed something. My feelings? Not part of the equation. That Tuesday night, I couldn't sleep, so I got up and went to grab a bottle of water from the kitchen. That's when I saw it, the file. It was just sitting there on the dining table, probably left behind when my mom came over the week before to borrow a few documents. She does that, shows up unannounced, says she's helping, then rifles through things like she owns the place. Normally, I wouldn't touch her stuff, but something about this file made me stop. It had my name on it. Emily Emergency Fund. My heart actually lifted for a second, like maybe she'd been saving something for me after all. Like maybe all those times she said, "We've got your back," weren't just polite lies. I opened it slowly, almost like I didn't want to break the spell too fast. But of course, that there was nothing magical inside. No cash, no documents, just a single bank statement showing a 0 balance and a handwritten note in my mom's tight, loopy cursive. Used for Rick April. That was it. No explanation, just another sacrifice quietly made in my name without my consent. It wasn't just the money, it was the casualness of it, like I didn't matter, like the idea of helping Rick automatically overruled any future need I might ever have. I sat at the table for a long time after that, not crying, not angry, just stunned. I wasn't even surprised, really. I was just done. Done hoping they'd notice. Done pretending this was love. Done being the dependable one. That's when the idea started to form. It wasn't a dramatic burn-it-all-down moment. It was calm, quiet. I looked around my apartment, which they still referred to as that little place, and started mentally dividing what I'd take if I left. Not just for a weekend or a break. I mean really left. The next day, I started making a list. I called Jenna, my best friend since college, the only person who had ever really called my parents out on their nonsense, and told her I was thinking about leaving. She didn't ask me why, she just said, "Finally." I think that was the first time in years I felt like someone was on my side. She came over that night with wine, a shredder, and a bunch of moving boxes she accidentally stole from her job supply closet. And as I packed my photo albums, my old journals, my small but hard-earned stash of emergency cash I'd hidden in a shoebox, I couldn't stop thinking about that yacht. I imagined them laughing, probably talking about me in some detached, patronizing way. Like I was always the dramatic one. Like I'd just get over it, like I always did. What they didn't know was that this time, I wasn't just mad. I was planning something final. As I packed, I found more little things that stung. Notes from Rick thanking me for helping him out of tight spots. Receipts from shared family dinners where I picked up the tab. Birthday cards with no messages inside, just love, Mom and Dad. All these little reminders that my place in the family had always been more functional than emotional. Like a piece of furniture they relied on but never really saw. And yet, I kept packing. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I just kept going, one drawer at a time. Because I knew if I stopped for even a second, the weight of all those years might crush me. I left their spare house key on the table, next to the empty emergency fund file. That felt symbolic in a way. They'd taken everything in my name. Now they could have the key too, but they'd never get another piece of me again. I told Jenna I'd be ready to go by Sunday. That gave me 3 days, just enough time to disappear without them realizing I was never coming back. I think there's something quietly terrifying about realizing you were never seen as a person in your own family, that every moment you thought you were being supported was actually a trade-off, an unspoken loan you never agreed to take, but were always expected to repay, interest included. That's what kept echoing in my head that Thursday morning, 2 days after I found the file. As I stood in the kitchen with my phone in one hand and a cup of coffee I forgot to drink in the other. I was staring out the window, watching a neighbor teach their kid how to ride a bike, wondering if any of those parents knew what it felt like to be the child who never really made it off the training wheels, at least emotionally, because nobody in your house thought you deserved the same kind of push forward. The voicemail had come in just after 10. I hadn't picked up because I didn't recognize the number, and I'd gotten into the habit of avoiding unknown calls ever since my dad had started handing out my phone number to his friends. Old retired men who thought I had nothing better to do than help them fix their printer problems or pop by to clean out their storage unit as a favor. So I let it ring. Then I listened. And that's when I heard my mother's voice, cheerful in that specific tone she reserved for Rick, the one that made her sound 10 years younger, like she forgot she even had another child who might need a kind word once in a while. She didn't realize the call had gone to voicemail, and for 30 seconds, I got to hear the uncensored version of what she said about me when I wasn't around. "Emily's fine," she laughed. "She always bounces back. Nothing ever really gets to her. I mean, she takes things so seriously, poor thing, but she's tough. She'll manage. Honestly, it's better she's not here. Rick really needs this time to relax." Then there was a clink of glasses, followed by my father chiming in with a joke I couldn't quite catch. And the last thing I heard was my mom saying, "She'll understand, she always does." That was the moment it stopped being about disappointment. It turned into disgust, not the kind you scream about, but the kind that settles into your bones and hardens there, the kind that makes your spine go stiff and your hands stop trembling. I played the voicemail twice more, not because I couldn't believe it, but because I wanted to make sure I heard every word exactly right. They didn't just forget me, they calculated it. They decided Rick deserved their attention and their affection more than I did. They didn't even lie to themselves about it anymore. And suddenly, it was like I was seeing the last 20 years of my life with a brand new lens. I started digging that afternoon. Not for drama or confrontation, but for clarity. I pulled out my old bank statements, opened up tax returns, logged into dusty email accounts I hadn't checked in years. And what I found wasn't a smoking gun. It was worse. It was quiet, boring, undeniable proof that over and over again, I'd funded their lives without even realizing it. The loans I gave to my parents that were never paid back. The times I covered Rick's part of the rent when we briefly lived together during his second rebrand as an entrepreneur. The time I co-signed on a car loan that magically turned into his name only 6 months later. Every favor they said they'd return. Every little just for now that became permanent. It was all there, clear as day. They hadn't stolen from me in the dramatic movie kind of way. No, they'd just quietly withdrawn from my life account, like I was some sort of human amp, trusting I'd never notice, or worse, never complain. I didn't call them. I didn't even send a message. Instead, I took out a yellow legal pad and started writing down every financial transaction I could remember, every gift that turned out to be an obligation, every time I'd paid emotionally or otherwise to keep the peace. And next to each item, I wrote down the name of the person who benefited. Rick's name showed up over 30 times. My parents' names combined? 15. Mine? Once. Just once. A $100 gift card I'd received for Christmas in 2016. That was it. That was my entire take from the family economy. The anger came slow, like a leak in a gas line. You don't notice it right away, but then it fills the room and makes everything flammable. I didn't yell, I didn't throw anything, but inside, I could feel something sharp and final locking into place. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. I was going to vanish on my own terms, but not before leaving a few breadcrumbs behind that they couldn't ignore. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to erode, quietly, efficiently, and completely. By evening, I had an entire plan. I called Jenna and told her I needed a burner phone. She laughed at first, thinking I was kidding, until she heard the edge in my voice. She didn't ask questions, just said she'd bring one by the next day. I also called my landlord and told him I'd be moving out by the end of the month. He sounded disappointed, told me I was the most reliable tenant he'd ever had, and that he wished I'd reconsider. I told him I appreciated it, but I was moving somewhere quieter, somewhere with fewer ghosts. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I imagined Rick pouring another glass of champagne, probably telling some exaggerated story about how he rescued the family business, how he was the backbone of our little empire. I imagined my mom nodding along, sipping her drink, pretending she didn't just sacrifice her daughter's future to prop up her son's ego. And I imagined my dad sitting there quietly, probably thinking about golf or his retirement account. Because in his mind, if no one's yelling, then everything must be fine. But things weren't fine, not anymore. I wasn't the quiet, dependable daughter they could ignore until they needed something. I was a woman who was about to vanish from their lives without so much as a slammed door. And when I was gone, I wasn't just leaving. I was taking everything they used to define me with me. Their helper, their fallback plan, their guilt sponge, all gone. And when they'd come back to their quiet little house with the good lighting and expensive throw pillows, what they'd find wasn't just an empty room. It was a silence louder than any goodbye I could have given. There's something disturbingly liberating about packing your life into 2 bags, while your family celebrates another one of your brother's milestones, like it's a national holiday. And the house you thought was your safe place slowly turns into nothing more than 4 rented walls, echoing with memories you didn't know were so one-sided until you saw them from the rearview mirror of your own escape plan. That morning, I woke up before sunrise, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I didn't want to. Lying in bed had started to feel like a waste of time now that I knew I was leaving. And each minute spent staring at the ceiling only reminded me of all the seconds I'd wasted waiting for someone to care without being asked. I didn't make coffee, didn't turn on music, didn't even brush my hair. I just started grabbing things. First, the essentials, my paperwork, some savings I'd hidden inside an old pair of boots, my passport, my birth certificate, and that stupid emergency contact list I once updated and laminated for my parents' fridge, thinking it made me helpful when all it really did was cement my role as the unpaid assistant in our very dysfunctional little company. Then the irreplaceables, my grandmother's wedding band that she left to me, not Sharon, which had always irritated my mom in that quiet way where she never says anything directly, just sighs when she sees it on your hand and asks if you're sure it fits right. I didn't bother with furniture or appliances or anything that would tie me down to this place any longer than necessary. I took clothes that were comfortable and durable, photos that didn't feature Rick, and a few keepsakes from Jenna's daughter, who used to come over and draw stick figure families that always, without fail, had me in the middle. That kid saw me more clearly than my entire bloodline ever had. I taped up the 2 garbage bags I was using instead of suitcases, because somehow that felt more poetic than anything else, and shoved them in the hallway, one against the coat closet, the other leaned like a body against the front door. The place was already starting to feel less like mine and more like a set I'd been performing on. A long-running play with a single actress and an audience who never clapped. By mid-morning, Jenna arrived, exactly as promised, holding 2 burner phones like she was a spy and not an accountant with a minivan and a daycare run in an hour. She didn't ask if I was sure. She just looked at me with that face that says she's been waiting for this moment longer than I have. We went through the list I'd made the night before, a checklist of things to cancel, things to forward, things to shut down or walk away from. She handled the utilities, the subscriptions, the lease break. I handled the money. I emptied out the one joint account my mother had insisted we keep for emergencies and transferred it to a separate bank she'd never think to look at. It wasn't much, maybe a few thousand, but it was mine, and more importantly, it was symbolic. I closed the account and left the confirmation email open on my laptop screen, just in case she decided to snoop after the fact, which I knew she would. I deleted all my saved passwords from the house computer, removed myself from every family group text, and disconnected the old home security app from my phone. If they noticed I was gone, I didn't want to be the one to tell them. I wanted them to feel it like an absence, not an announcement. Right before lunch, I took a deep breath and walked into the guest room, the one my mother still referred to as Rick's room, even though he hadn't slept in it for over a decade. I opened the closet and pulled out the shoebox she used to hide financial papers and little things she didn't want my dad to find. Inside, I found old receipts, expired checks, and a folded envelope with my name on it. I opened it with a kind of shaky detachment, like I already knew it was going to punch me in the gut, and sure enough, it was the signed loan agreement for Rick's second business. The same business she told me she wasn't involved in. And there it was, my forged signature at the bottom, shaky and wrong and clearly not mine. And yet enough to make me legally responsible if things had gone south. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I just laughed. The kind of dry, bitter laugh that only happens when you're so far past shocked that you loop back around to amusement. I took a photo of the document, sent it to the burner phone, and then stuffed the original into a manila envelope labeled Return to Sender that I planned to leave behind like a calling card. Let them explain that to each other. Jenna helped me take the bags to her car, and we sat in silence for a moment before she said, "Do you want to say anything before we go?" I thought about it, and for a second, I imagined writing a letter, maybe something poetic or searing or painfully honest. But then I remembered all the times I'd poured my heart into messages and conversations and interventions, only to be dismissed, talked over, or worse, pitied. I didn't want to be pitied. I didn't want closure. I wanted distance. So instead of a note, I printed out the screenshot of my account balance right after I emptied it, attached the picture of the forged signature, and slipped them both into separate envelopes addressed to my mother and my father. No explanation, no signature. Just proof, let them draw their own conclusions. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. I didn't feel that cinematic swell of regret, or fear, or even triumph. I just felt empty in the best possible way, like I'd finally made space for something else to exist. And somewhere miles away, I imagined the sound of champagne glasses clinking on a yacht deck, my brother making another joke at my expense, my mother nodding along, my father checking his watch, all of them thinking they knew exactly where I was. They didn't. And soon they'd realize they never really had. When you spend your entire life giving pieces of yourself away to keep other people comfortable, there eventually comes a moment where the silence left in your absence is so loud, it makes even the most oblivious ones shift in their seats, unsure if what they're feeling is loss, guilt, or just the creeping discomfort of finally noticing the void where your effort used to live. And for me, that moment came 3 days after I vanished, when they returned to that house and found that everything familiar was still technically there. Same couch, same photographs on the mantle, same coffee mugs in the cabinet, But none of it felt right anymore because the one person who made sure it all ran quietly and smoothly was gone without warning, without a tantrum. And most unsettling of all, without a word. They came back late in the afternoon, after a full week on the water, tanned and laughing and reeking of that self-satisfaction that only people who believe they've done nothing wrong can truly radiate. And I know this not because I was hiding in the bushes or spying from a car parked across the street, but because I had arranged, very carefully and with no small amount of petty satisfaction, to have access to the footage from the neighbor's security system, which conveniently caught the front steps and half the driveway in full color, with audio just clear enough to catch the sharp edge of confusion in my mother's voice when she said, "That's strange. Why isn't the porch light on?" I watched from Jenna's living room as Sharon fumbled with the key I had left behind on the table, now taped to the front door in an envelope labeled, "You'll need this." And I could see the exact moment it hit her that something was off. Not because she was worried about me, but because she was immediately inconvenienced by the change in routine. Her first instinct wasn't, "Where's Emily?" but "Why wasn't this handled properly?" And that, more than anything, told me I had been right to leave without giving them the chance to twist the narrative or tug at my guilt like they always had. Rick walked in behind her, still in boat shoes and one of those smug linen shirts that practically scream, "I've never done a real day's work in my life." And he didn't even bother pretending to care, just asked where the thermostat remote was, completely ignoring the fact that my shoes were gone from the rack, my coats missing from the closet, and every drawer in the guest room standing open like empty mouths mid-confession. My dad, ever the ghost in his own life, said nothing at all, just walked into the kitchen, probably checking for leftovers or mail, as if nothing about the energy in the house had shifted at all, which in a way made sense, because you can't miss what you never bothered to notice in the first place. But I wasn't just gone. I'd made sure my absence would ring in their ears every time they tried to pretend otherwise. The envelope waiting for each of them on the dining table was placed precisely, centered, not dramatic, just undeniable. Inside, each one received a different kind of reminder. For Sharon, it was the screenshot of the forged signature on the loan paperwork she never thought I'd find, stapled to a printout of the bank transfer logs from the account she drained under the guise of family emergencies. For Stan, it was a ledger of every expense I had covered without repayment, marked not with bitterness, but with precision, so he could never again claim ignorance. And for Rick, it was a single sheet of paper with the words, "You always land on your feet because I'm the one who built the runway," typed in 12-point font, center-aligned, no signature, no explanation, just truth, delivered cold. The video didn't catch what happened after they opened those envelopes, but the text started soon after, first from Sharon, short and frantic. "Emily, what is this? Call me immediately." Then one from Rick. "This is dramatic, even for you." That one made me laugh out loud. And finally, a voicemail from my dad that started with a long pause and ended with him simply saying, "I don't know what's going on, but this isn't the way." But it was the way. And it was the only way I could make sure they'd finally listen. Not to me necessarily, but to the echo of everything I'd done for them once it stopped happening. And then came the part I didn't expect, at least not so soon. 2 days later, I received a certified letter, not from one of them directly, but from their lawyer, a man I had only met once at some retirement party years ago, and who now, apparently, had been tasked with sending me a cease and desist and a vague threat of legal action for emotional damages and financial disruption. Words so laughably ironic that Jenna nearly choked on her iced tea reading them out loud. They claimed I had compromised Rick's business relationships by leaking private financial documents, as if the truth itself was somehow slander. They claimed I had caused emotional distress by my abrupt departure, as if I owed them the courtesy of a curtain call. I didn't respond, I didn't call, I didn't even send the lawyer a reply. I just printed out the letter, slipped it into the back of my notebook, and underlined one sentence with a red pen. We believe her actions were both calculated and malicious. Because they were right, it was calculated. But it wasn't malicious, it was necessary. The most telling part Not one of them showed up at my door. Not even Jenna's. Not even to scream or beg or apologize. And I think that's because deep down, they all knew they didn't deserve that confrontation. They knew they wouldn't win. They knew this wasn't about a single argument or a family disagreement. It was about years of indifference finally being returned in kind. And so the house sat there, unchanged, and yet completely different, with all its corners and cushions untouched by the person who used to keep it all together. The mail piled up. The fridge started to stink. The porch light remained off, and I stayed exactly where I was, unknown, unreachable, and undeniably free. Because sometimes the loudest goodbye you can give is no goodbye at all. There's a very specific kind of peace that comes not from forgiveness, not from understanding, and certainly not from reconciliation, but from the simple, unshakable knowledge that you finally stopped trying to make people care about things they never even saw slipping through your fingers. And that peace, quiet, unfamiliar, and entirely mine, settled over me like the soft hum of an engine on a long drive away from a place you don't realize was choking you. Until the air changes, and suddenly your chest doesn't feel like it's caving in every time someone says your name. I had moved into a tiny cottage near the coast, the kind of place people only dream about when they're too tired to dream about anything that requires more effort than simply waking up and existing, and for the first few weeks, I didn't unpack much. I kept the bags near the door, not because I thought I'd run, but because I wasn't yet convinced I wouldn't. I spent my mornings walking along the shoreline with a thermos of gas station coffee, wearing a sweatshirt that had long since lost its color and shape, letting the salt air peel away whatever invisible layers of obligation I had worn for decades like armor, only to realize I was never actually protecting myself, just making sure no one else had to see how bruised I really was. I worked at a small diner owned by a couple who treated me like someone who had always belonged there, even though I told them almost nothing about where I came from or why I had arrived with no references and too many questions. They didn't ask and I didn't offer, which was exactly the kind of exchange I had always wished for. A place where silence wasn't suspicious, just sacred. I served coffee to retirees, tourists, and fishermen, and I smiled not because I had to, but because sometimes it felt like maybe, just maybe, I was starting to mean it again. My phone, the burner Jenna had set me up with, was never turned on during the day. I checked it maybe once a week, and even then, only to delete the voicemails I had no interest in hearing. Most were from Sharon, her voice carefully trembling, as if she was performing grief over a loss she hadn't yet earned. Some were from Rick, who oscillated between condescending sarcasm and shallow attempts at what he must have thought passed for sincerity. Just one, was from my father, and it was short, clipped, and devoid of emotion. He simply said, "We got your message. I hope you're happy." That was the only one I saved. Not because it mattered, but because it confirmed everything I'd ever suspected. They hadn't lost a daughter, they'd lost their housekeeper, their therapist, their fallback. What they didn't know, what they never could have known, was that I wasn't just gone physically. I was gone in the way people only disappear when they've finally outgrown the roles they were cast into without consent. I wasn't just away, I was reborn, and I had no intention of returning. Then, about 2 months after I left, the invitation arrived. It came in a heavy cream envelope, hand-addressed in that annoyingly perfect calligraphy that screamed expensive event planner. It was Rick's wedding. Of course it was. Not just a ceremony, but a full weekend in Napa. Black tie, vineyard backdrop, curated guest list. The kind of affair where every detail is posted online in real time, where people are too busy documenting the moment to actually live it. I opened the envelope without flinching, already expecting what I would find, but it still caught me off guard that they had the audacity to send it to me. Not even an apology, not even a letter tucked inside. Just the implication that I should show up and smile and play my role like nothing had ever happened. And for the briefest moment, I considered going. Not to make a scene or start a fight, but to stand in the back, dressed in quiet defiance, a reminder of what they lost. Not because I died or disappeared, but because they refused to look closely enough to realize I had been leaving long before I ever walked out that door. But then I thought better of it. Instead, I took the RSVP card, checked decline, and under the line marked regrets, I wrote, "This time, drink to someone who stayed." I put it in the mail without a return address. A week later, I visited the small storage unit I had rented, under an alias 2 towns over, a place that had no significance to anyone but me, where I kept the real collection. Not clothes or keepsakes or furniture, but documents, voice recordings, emails, scanned bank statements, and printed photos. Proof. Not for them, for me. So that on the days I wondered if maybe I'd imagined it all, if maybe I'd overreacted or been too harsh, I could open that metal door, sit on the cold floor, and remind myself of the arithmetic of neglect. All the little things that added up to a total so devastatingly final, no one could call it anything less than abandonment in slow motion. There was a tape recorder inside, yes, an actual tape recorder, the old-fashioned kind, and on it I had started to record pieces of my story, not as a diary and not for revenge, but because one day someone might need to hear it. Maybe another woman sitting in a too-quiet house, wondering if her family's silence meant she was broken or just invisible. Maybe she would hear my voice and realize she wasn't crazy, she was just alone. And there's a difference, because the truth is, I didn't leave to hurt them. I left to find myself in a world where I didn't have to apologize for being hurt, for needing help, for wanting more than silent tolerance dressed up as love. And as I locked the door to that unit and walked back to my car, the sun was setting behind the low hills, painting the sky in soft orange and gray streaks. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing something or running from anything. I was just existing, fully, finally. Some goodbyes are shouted through slammed doors and echoing fights. Some are whispered between tears and half-finished explanations. But the most powerful goodbyes? They're the ones you never say out loud, because the people they're meant for never deserved to hear them in the first place.